Hello emo kids, it's Sebastian from the Rhythm section, and today I'm going to be emo-splaining you guys on 5 of the most basic, essential emo albums that you need in order to spice up your MySpace pages. So first of all, let's clarify what exactly I mean by emo, because emo is a genre of music that's notoriously kind of difficult to define and pretty diverse. If you're looking for emo rap, I'm not going to be talking about any emo rap or emo trap in this video, but I would suggest that you check out my last video where I talked about Blade Ever Since, because that's one of my favorite emo rap albums. And even just within guitar-focused emo, like the more rock side of emo, it's probably likely that you've heard people talk about real and fake emo before. For people who are already a little familiar with real emo, I want to throw in a little disclaimer real quick that neither The Rites of Spring or Sunny Day Real Estate's debut albums made my list in this video. Just personal taste, I think Rites of Spring's debut is a little bit too reminiscent of post-punk and hardcore to seem really representative of what emo is for someone who's getting into emo. And as far as Sunny Day Real Estate, Diary has just never really struck a chord with me as much as the 5 albums that I am going to recommend. So nothing against either of those, but I thought I'd throw that out there. But to get back to that real emo term, more often than not, I see it used pretty much just to gatekeep and say that groups like Panic at the Disco or My Chemical Romance aren't real emo, usually just because they're popular. The truth of the matter is, though, that these groups have made music that contains elements of emo, especially in the vocal style and some of the lyrical content. However, if you actually listen to the musical content of albums like A Fever You Can't Sweat Out or Infinity on High, the thing is that the music that these bands play really does border more on pop rock. So even though some of the content fits in the stereotypical expectations of emo, the types of emo that I'm going to be talking about really more reminiscent of indie rock and has elements of punk, musical styles that aren't really represented in albums by groups like Panic at the Disco. I still love the Black Parade, but lots of people will tell you that it's not emo, and I would probably agree. But it's not just because the album's popular. Musically speaking, it's really closer to a mixture of like pop punk plus rock opera, kind of like American Idiot, and it just has certain aesthetic elements that border more on stereotypical associations with emo. All that said though, lots of pop punky music really can edge pretty close to the border of emo, so the first album I'll be recommending is one that will be a little more approachable for people who have previously only had experience with emo through groups like My Chemical Romance and Fall Out Boy and the other poppy groups. Joyce Manor's Never Hungover Again from 2014 is a pretty pop-punky record, but the indie rock guitar work, the hardcore punk-influenced bite-sized songwriting, as well as the signature emo vocal style and lyrical content place it pretty securely within the emo spectrum. It just so happens to be a very melodic emo record though, with a lot of really catchy hooks. The first time I heard this album, when I was first really getting into it, I would pretty much wake up every single day with a different melody from this album stuck in my head. And that's pretty much true for a lot of Joyce Manor's work. Their debut self-titled album is also really good too. The lightning quick length of the album, as well as the kind of angsty sentimentality of the lyrics, might lead people to think that Joyce Manor's work is kind of shallow or there's not much going on here. But really, the short length of the tracks leads them to explore some kind of interesting songwriting, actually. Each track is really just a nugget of so many undeniably great melodies. When you listen to just one of the tracks off this album, they're so short that it can be hard to just put a pause on things and not want to listen through the whole rest of the album. And the last thing is that the performances on this album are pure electricity. They will get you pumped up when you feel like your life sucks. The next album that I'm going to recommend, and arguably more important to check out than Joyce Manor's album, is American Football's self-titled debut from 1999. Pretty inarguably one of the most iconic emo albums of all time, and also one of the most influential albums of all time within the emo sphere. And what's interesting about this album is that if you don't really know about what lots of emo music sounds like, this album might actually surprise you with how tame and soothing the music is. Lots of emo albums utilize abrasive guitars and whiny vocals, but really this album's kind of subversive in how it uses such smooth, clean guitar sounds and relatively soothing music, but still achieves such emotional intensity. And lots of trends within emo music were started by this album as well, from the kind of twinkly, clean guitar lines to the funky time signatures, the lonely trumpet lines even, pretty much what American football did by injecting little elements of math rock, indie rock, and post-rock into emo on this album had ripples of influence within the genre for years, and it's still being felt. The differences between an album like this and Never Hungover Again can seem like night and day, but in the end, it's really mostly the end-of-the-world emotions shared by both albums that make them both quintessential emo. And also, if you've never heard any of the music on this list or anything I've recommended in this video so far, you've got to check out Never Meant, the first song on this album. It's pretty much the most iconic emo song ever. And up next is Cap'n Jazz's 1995 album,
Burritos, Inspiration Point, Fork Balloon Sports, Cards in Spokes, Automatic Biographies, Kites, Kung Fu Trophies, Banana Peels We've Slept On, and Eggshells We've Tippy-Toed Over.
which is sometimes shortened to Shmap'n Shmazz or just Cap'n Jazz. But lots of the time that doesn't even matter anyways, because like on Spotify and lots of the streaming platforms, you can only really listen to this album through the Cap'n Jazz compilation and Alphabet Apology, and the vinyl for this album pretty much doesn't even exist. But Shmap'n Shmazz is mostly important to me because it's one of the earliest emo albums that, at least to me, sounds like what most of the genre would go on to sound like for the rest of the 90s, the 2000s, and into the 21st century. This album came before American Football, but it actually sounds a lot like the music on American Football, but with a little extra like punky energy mixed in. And you might be able to attribute the similarity to the fact that the lead singer of Cap'n Jazz on this album is actually brothers with the lead singer of American Football, the Kinsella brothers, and the lead singer of American Football actually plays drums on this album. Anyways though, Shmap'n Shmazz is a lot messier and a little more palpable than American Football, which has led lots of people to actually cite this album as a bit of like an inception point for emo pop punk. I would argue that the earliest traces of this sort of music actually go back into the 80s with like Descendants or something. But you're not necessarily wrong if you say something like that about Shmap'n Shmazz. And by the way, one of the most important parts about this album, which I think I haven't even mentioned yet, is that the songs are great. Basil's Kite and Oh Messy Life are two of my favorite emo tracks, and they're both really catchy as well. And to jump back forward a few years, the next album I'm going to recommend is Brand New's The Devil and God Are Raging Inside Me. This 2006 emo rock album is one of the lushest and most intense emo albums that I know, and it incorporates a lot of the dense sort of indie rock style of groups like Built to Spill. And one of the things that might make this album a lot easier for certain people to approach is that the vocals on this album aren't quite like the signature emo whininess. It's actually more of like a mix of kind of sad whisper, like the National type vocals, with a little bit of alternative rock like Deftones vocal fry. The Devil and God also deviates from traditional emo-isms by presenting a little bit of a more mature sort of angst in the lyrical themes, as compared to like the pop-punk hedonism of Joyce Manor or the scribbled high school diaries of American Football. Tackling topics like depression, hate, and religion, The Devil and God Are Raging Inside Me basically sounds like a guy who used to write and sing about failed relationships and bad breakups, getting older, and realizing the full new depth of exciting things for him to be sad about. Where American Football has lines like, "Considering everything, me leaving with regrets only makes sense. I'll see you when we're both not so emotional." The Devil and God has lyrics like, "Who do you carry the torch for, my young man? Do you believe in anything? Do you carry it around just to burn things down?" And finally, the last album I'm going to recommend is the Hotelier's Home Like No Place Is There from 2014. Apparently, 2014 was a great year for emo. Home Like No Place Is There is pretty much regarded as a modern emo essential, and it's pretty easy to see why. It kind of works as like a summary of the entire genre. The instrumentals carry pretty much the full range of like twinkly emo to like very intense screaming emo, like loud guitars and everything. Plus lots of the lyrical themes explored are pretty standard emo themes like depression, suicide, family issues, LGBTQ issues, and it's even got pretty much the most "this is an emo album" art that you're ever gonna see. To me, this is really truly standard emo in a way, but what really makes this album special is that it's all of the standard emo-isms perfected. Even though it is very much an album of its style, the lyrics are still extremely personal, and the vocal and instrumental performances are very passionate as well. Every melody and hook will be stuck in your head after just a few listens too. Among the Wildflowers is probably the biggest highlight from this album for me, but the intro track is definitely considered a legendary emo moment. And that's 5 albums to get you into emo. Have you heard all of these? Which is your favorite? Are you an emo kid? Why are there no black people or women in emo? Answer these questions down below and subscribe if you enjoyed. Bye-bye!